So thanks, Wade. So please feel free if you would like to switch off your camera, but your name will still be showing on the recording. I would like to just provide some it's more like a recap of the revised code. As we know, the code belongs to our members, so it's very important for us to make sure the code is relevant and is useful for all of us. That's why at ACFID, we've been working with our members to regularly updating the code. The most recent one was back in 2023. Next slide, please. So the code was revised in 2023, and as we all know, we had the launch event this year in August in Melbourne, but the revised code came into effect actually on the 30th of June 2024. It was an 18-month consultation with all our members and our stakeholders. In summary, most of the code and quality assurance framework remains the same. And also we pretty much keep the purpose, objectives, the structure, and also the compliance mechanism pretty much the same. There's no change. What we have changed is to increase alignment between the revised code and other standards and regulations here in Australia, including ACNC standards. We have tried to remove duplications and improve clarity and consistency with objective to reduce the compliance burden of our members. We have strengthened standards in the areas of climate change, locally led development, anti-racism and racial justice. We have also included the MDS, that is Misconduct Disclosure Scheme for humanitarian organizations. Next slide, please. On this slide, pretty much we just put together all the new indicators and or verifiers. As you know that in our quality assurance framework, we have compliance indicators. To help you to understand how to be compliant with these indicators, we have verifiers. So this slide just gives you an overview of pretty much all the indicators, verifiers. When you prepare your code reporting, it's good to keep these changes in mind. Next slide, please, Wait.
Sorry, Doug. Is that to say that, with these specific indicators that have had substantive changes, that all members are allowed to mark themselves as non-compliant?
Yeah, I'm going to kind of come to that in the next slide.
Sure.
Yeah, that's a good point.
That's not what the next slide is.
Yeah, sorry. It's kind of we're kind of jumping around a bit. We did talk about the misconduct disclosure scheme, and I think it's important to remind all of us this scheme is designed to share misconduct data across employers. That is the nature of the scheme. I mentioned that we have decided to include this in a revised code. So the members who deploy personnel for humanitarian initiative will be required to participate in this scheme, but it's not mandatory. For other members, you are encouraged to participate. That is something we should keep in mind when we look at the MDS, the inclusion to the revised code. Next one, please. Yeah, and we just put that link in the chat box if you want to know more about this scheme. Reporting to ACFID, we talk about the major changes to the code, and we kind of share that all the main compliance indicators and verifiers added to the revised code. In terms of the reporting process, the process will remain the same. So all of you are required to submit your report 5 months after your financial year. As you know, at the moment, we are looking at a 3-year reporting cycle, and this cycle will continue. So pretty much you are going to prepare for a code self-assessment report, followed by 2 exceptions report. And after that, the cycle will start again. I believe probably most of you have a financial year end of 30th of June. And in that case, you will be among the first batch of members to report under the revised code. Next slide, please. You are all very experienced at preparing the CSA report. Following the introduction of the revised code, I think it's important for us to probably have this slide to remind you which are the documents that you are required to upload when you put in your CSA report via my ACFID portal. As you know, previously you asked to upload annual report and audited financial statements. Now there's a new requirement with the strengthened standards in the area of climate action. As you can see from this slide, according to the quality assurance framework, we have 2 compliance indicators you are required to comply with. And under these 2 indicators, there are 3 verifiers. So that means potentially we are looking at 3 documents you are required to upload. There will be 2 policy documents. One, commit your organization to promote climate action in the work you do, development and humanitarian initiatives. Another policy document is to commit your organization to minimize the risk of climate change in your organization internal operations. And the third document is around the framework or tools or templates you use to do your climate change risk analysis. So this is good to keep in mind, kind of like change to the reporting or compliance expectations. Wait, ask me about when I show you that slide with pretty much all the changes with our compliance indicators and verifiers. And this is a kind of slide very relevant to the previous one. This is why it's more about as code secretariat and what be our kind of compliance expectations, since now we have the revised code. The first point I'd like to share with you for all our members, for your November reporting, you will be asked to report for the period from the 1st of July 2023 to 30th of June 2024. Because the changes to the code has been relatively limited, so we hope when I talk about the ways, both the Code of Conduct Committee, the Independent Code of Conduct Committee, and also the Code Secretariat, pretty much like my team, we hope that the transition will be quite straightforward. Recognize the changes, and we understand it will take time for you to change your practice or to develop and implement new policies. So that is the point we try to make. Previously, it's more about it is okay for the new compliance indicators. It is okay for us to accept when you do your self-assessment, you can self-assess as non-compliant for the revised commitments or for these new compliance indicators. But the whole idea that the kind of like compliance expectation is not like when you prepare your report in my ACFID portal, it's not like you just leave them alone or you just do nothing without any kind of response. we do ask you to look at this revised commitment. Sorry, I think I was muted. So we do ask you to provide a rationale about the reason why at the moment you are self-assessing yourself as non-compliant, and also to have a clear plan in place with active steps to address the non-compliance. And the Code of Conduct Committee agreed to give us 12 months to address these areas of non-compliance identified through your own self-assessment process. For the other parts of the code where there's no change, all our members are expected to self-assess as compliant. So it's the same as your previous report. I'll just pause here just in case we have questions. If you feel like it's a bit confusing, let me know. Feel free to put your questions in the chat box. Okay, I'll continue. And if you have questions, we can also answer these questions at the very end. Another thing for compliance with the introduction of the revised code, it's good to keep in mind that complaints will be assessed against the version of the code in place at the time of events that trigger the complaint. So we will be looking at this specific complaint and also look at the time of this event and make the decision about with which code we are going to look at this particular complaint. Thanks, Wade. Next slide, please.
So, Doug, would you like to answer the question in the chat first before we move on to
Of course,
financial
yeah.
and annual reporting?
So we do have a question here. Is can you confirm when the 12 month starts from? I think an earlier seminar said that it was from when ACFID reviewed at CSA, not when the CSA was lodged. This is a really good question. I feel like to some extent, the reason why we're having this seminar is because this will be the first batch for us to look at your code reporting and the revised code. Can I take this question offline and we can share with you a precise answer in an email? I think it's good for us to check with our colleagues about this particular one. There's another question is for members who submitted the CSA report and are assessed, do they need to go back and reassess them per the revised code? I'm not too sure about your question. Do you mean that you have already have a report being assessed by the code team? Or can you just like unmute yourself to explain this better? No, if you have a CS report like being assessed by us, you are not going to be asked to go back and prepare a report and the revised code. I hope that is clear. Thank you. If we don't have any further immediate questions, probably it's time for me to hand over to Marvin to share with you some tips around financial and annual reporting.
Right. Thank you,
Thanks,
Doug.
Marvin.
Yep. Thank you. Good afternoon to all of you. I am Marvin, and I am the Standards and Code Advisor handling finance and governance sections of the code. So we are moving to an exciting part of the session, which are sharing some tips and tricks related to financial and annual reports. If you joined in our launching in the revised code roadshow last April, we shared to you some good news that there are actually no changes with the requirements of the code as far as quality principle 8 is concerned, except for some clarity of some financial terms in the financial reporting templates to align with ACNC and with the latest accounting standards. So these changes, as that you see in your screens, were reflected in the financial formats, and we have updated the financial definitions to include these, which you can see in the ACFID Quality Assurance Framework and the Good Practice Toolkit. So next slide, please. Just to quickly refresh you of one of the most important requirements of the Quality Principle 8, which is about the code requirement of having a code-compliant financial statements in your annual report. And that we have required formats specifically for your income statement or your financial performance, depending on your total consolidated revenue. Option 1, if you have a consolidated revenue of below $250,000, and option 2, if you have above 250,000 Australian dollars. Both options will have balance sheet and statement of changes in equity as required by the Australian laws and the Australian accounting standards. Next slide, please. Here are the income statement formats which I am talking about. You can see that donation and bequests are now combined. In the previous financial formats, they were presented separately. Aside from that, no other changes in this updated format. Thank you. Next slide. The bulk of the code's team work is assessing the members' compliance to the code. And we can say that overall, we are really, really proud of all of the members' efforts in your continued adherence to the code. As we all strive for continuous improvement, I am sharing to you then the list that needs improvement of the members in relation to Quality Principle 8. So these are the most common resubmission reasons based on the latest batch of CSAs we recently reviewed. First, looking at those related to Code Commitments 8.1 and 8.2, did you notice anything consistent with the list? I highlighted them in yellow for you. Majority just lacks confirmation that you have those existing in your policies and processes. And most of the time when we resubmit it back, the members were able to confirm and demonstrate their compliance to what the code requires. So imagine if you were able to provide complete and clear responses to the first time you are submitting your CSA. That would be a no resubmission for you. So let me come back to you for the items for 8.3 and continue our discussion for 8.1 and 8.2. Next slide, please, with me. Here are some actual examples of member responses which just lacks the confirmation I am talking about. The first example and the last example, as highlighted in green, we did not see any answer from a member, and when we asked for resubmission, they were able to respond back that they have this in practice. So it's just lacking confirmation that you adhere to this specific code requirement. Good documentation in answering is the key. For the second and third example, as highlighted in yellow, these are related to financial wrongdoing. And if you notice the responses from the members, they are just incomplete. The code requires that your financial wrongdoing policies includes policies against fraud, corruption, bribery, terrorism financing, money laundering, and violation of sanctions imposed by the Australian government. We need your confirmation that you continue to have these policies completely. These items for improvement are actually not new in the code, and I am sure most of you have this already existing in your organizations, since these were all heavily reviewed the first time you applied for ACFID membership. So it's actually just making sure that you continuously have them, and it will be good in your responses that you start by confirming that you continuously have your financial wrongdoing policies in place completely. Sorry, Whitney, can you go back to the previous slide? So going now to 8.3, the first one talks about a requirement that if you did not include your full financial statements with the code compliant financial reports in your annual report and only the summary financial report, which comprises of your code compliant income statement, balance sheet, and statement of changes in equity, you need a separate auditor's opinion for that, which pertains to that summary financial report. The last two items here are related to the content in your annual report. The first one talks about lacking information in your annual report of the learnings you were able to come across during implementation of your activities. So we are looking for reporting on learnings from your actual development and humanitarian work, which can include things that have worked well and areas for improvement. These insights could come from formal evaluations, routine monitoring, reflection, or simply the experience you gain from work. And the last item here talks about having insufficient information on members reporting for financial ratios and graphs when you are completing your plain language summary of income and expenditure and overall financial health in your annual report. So when you report financial ratios and graphs, which you are not required by the way, but if you do use it, you should apply ACFID's financial definitions in your presentations and calculations. Any use of ratios and graphs should be accompanied by a note explaining how they have been determined. This requirement of the code, by the way, applies not just to your annual report, but also in any means of communication you share to the public, such as your website. So the next slides will show some good examples of these last two items that I am talking about in 8.3. Thanks, Whitney. Having dedicated portions of pages in your annual report of your documentation of your evaluations and learning is not required. This information can actually be anywhere in your annual report, such as it can be inside your governing body message. This requirement of the code is about showing your commitment to continuous improvement, which is actually what the code aspires for. Next slide. So the next slide shows an example from a member who provided notes to explain how its financial ratios and graphs were determined. They started with the overall financial health summary of their organization. And next slide, please. Then provided ratios and graphs to interpret their revenues and expenses, with notes explaining how these ratios and graphs have been derived, which is from their audited financial statements and is consistent with the ACFID financial definition. So at the bottom part, you can see those notes that I'm talking about. It's really all about helping the readers understand this ratio and graphs that you shared in your annual report. So next slide, please. More tips and tricks for you for Quality Principle 8. And we hope that you do not use the plus add comment button in my ACFID, which means that you do not have for resubmission. But if you do, please click the add button and do not override your original response. So we have audit trail of your answers in our responses for our learning purposes. More of these tips and tricks in the My ACFID portal will be shared by our awesome Whitney in a while. I will end my presentation by sharing that a good and detailed response will always put a smile on our faces. We love details. We love to read stories of how you demonstrate your commitment to the code. Doing it right will save the both of us time and effort in terms of the work. Our goal should be no resubmissions. And when we review your CSA, so let us work together in achieving this. Thank you very much. So giving over now to Whitney.
Thanks, Marvin. Just before we move on, is there anybody with a financial question or an annual report question? You're welcome to pop it in the chat or unmute yourself and give us a yell. If not, I will move on. Thank you for that, Marvin. Thanks, Doug. So I'm Whitney. I think most of you will know me either by email or I've probably chatted to you at some point when you've submitted your CSA. Like Marvin says, we are here to help you prepare and submit a CSA, and we would love it if we can shorten the process, because I know a lot of members, we do have a bit of back and forth. So I'm going to tell you about how best to prepare and submit your CSA. So what should your organization be doing now? So now most of you, if your financial year just ended, you will know that your next reporting due date is the 30th of November. So we are able to give you a 3-month extension, but you do need to email us for an official ask. So if you can't make that 30th due date, please email us. Otherwise, we're going to chase you up. So from now until your due date, have a review and have a look through all of your policies and documents that might need reviewing or updating. Definitely have a check out some of our templates available. I'll put it in the chat. We do have a lot of resources that will show you exactly where all of the verifiers and commitments have changed in the revised code. So you know exactly where you need to update and where you need to be double checking. You can start self-assessing against your indicators already. And again, yes, make sure you discuss with whoever does all your finances, your accountant, your finance team, whoever that is, to make sure that all the change or your upcoming reporting matches the new revised code, requirements. So if you are interested and you haven't been along to any of our other webinars or code roadshows, there is a spot which I just linked on our website, which I put in the chat, that's where all of the changes and all of the detail and all of the history about the review and all the changes are available, including, again, resources and templates specifically to help meet compliance for this November. And just a reminder that while you are submitting a CSA report, you will have your compliance officer who needs to submit, but then you'll also need the approval from your CEO and from your board chair. Now, those steps are not automated. So our systems in ACFID does not send an email to your chair or your CEO telling them that they need to give approval. You need to do that as an internal process in your own organization. So lots of times we do get emails saying, oh, I think we've submitted, we check on our end. Why is it overdue? It's not actually overdue, you've submitted, but there are steps missing in approvals. Okay, so we did ask for some pre-prepared questions, and this was one of them. What are the required policy statements that an NGO should have in place? So there are different expectations for different things. So on the website, there is a very specific guideline. If you go and look at 7.3.4, those are the exact things that is required on your website. That is checked. And so if you are asked for a resubmission, you may be missing one of those things on your website. In your CSA submission for this revised code, and with the changing of focus areas, we are looking for your annual report and your climate policy. So in previous years, you were asked to submit your PSEAH, your complaints handling, as well as your child protection. This year, we're not looking for that because we've assessed all members for that. So this year, the new focus area is climate. And then internal within the organization, the QAF lists all of the different policies that you should be having in place. We don't need to check all those, and we don't usually check all those, but it's quite specific in which documents and which policies you're supposed to have. We also got a question about, is there a definition for research? And so when we're looking at CSAs, often we also remind a lot of folks that, hey, a lot of people tick, we don't do research. We're not a research organization. That's totally fine. We get that. But we do encourage you to see all monitoring and evaluation activities as a type of, research activity, because you're working with people, you're asking questions, and it can be an extractive kind of process. So think about that, especially now that we're, really putting a focus on what does locally led mean, what does power mean, just, all these activities are not in isolation with the work that we do. So again, we do know that there are changes coming, and change can be difficult, might be a bit scary, but we're promising and we're trying definitely not to be scary. Again, we have templates exactly, and we have tools such as an Excel spreadsheet for you to work offline with your teammates. We have a complete summary of all of the amended verifiers. We have a list of frequently asked questions, and we even have the financial reporting templates for you. So all you have to do is download them. Again, yeah, I've popped that link up on the chat. So definitely just once you get in there, you'll be able to see the list of all the different templates and topic sheets and guides that we have. Got a question. Do we need an ethical research framework for evaluations? Look, the code doesn't explicitly say that you have to, and it's not a compliance indicator. It's a good practice indicator, which means it's not compulsory, so no, you don't have to, but we do encourage you to do that. So short answer is no. Long answer is no, but we would like you to do that if you have the time and space for that. I hope that answers your question, Anne. All right, so another tip and trick is to always go back to your dashboard. I know that previously we used a different system and it was a bit clunky, not super user-friendly. Hopefully, after 18 months of transitioning to a whole new, brand new system, hopefully this new My ACFID portal is a lot user-friendly and a lot easier for you to use. And so we are really encouraging you to use your dashboard, log in. It will tell you exactly everything and anything you need to know about your progress and about your reporting. So for example, what I've listed up here, it shows you exactly what you would see when you log in. You'll be able to see your old past CSAs. You'll be able to see ones that have been completed, ones that are in progress, due dates, who is the compliance contact, and what financial year you're reporting in. Now, down the bottom here, I've just listed just in case, just to show you how the process flow goes. So usually it starts on once we've enrolled you into the system, it says not yet started. Once you start writing in it, it moves to in progress. And the highlighted yellow bits don't need to be in any specific order, but once you've submitted, you do need to have your CEO and your chair approve. So it will tell you it's complete, you finished, the compliance contact has submitted it, but either the CEO and the chair are waiting to approve it, or it's just waiting for a CEO or just waiting for a chair. So you know, sometimes we do get emails going, oh, we think we've submitted it, what next? And so again, you can email us, but if you use your portal, you'll know exactly where you are in the specific process. So then what happens is once you've submitted it to us and it's waiting in our queue for Marvin and I to, you know, assess, it will say submitted awaiting ACFID feedback. Now, while we're assessing it, you will either get an, you know, ACFID review complete. Yay, you have no resubmissions. You've done the right thing first time around. Process complete. Reporting done for the year. See you next year. That's great. We all love that. But we also do get ACFID feedback complete, resubmission required. That means that, you know, we're seeking some clarity on some of your answers. We've got some questions about one of your responses, and we've asked for you to resubmit with some more detail. If you have any questions, just pop it in the chat, or you can save it up until the end. So, what does filling out your CSA reporting actually look like? If you log into your My ACFID, and if you can't log in, please email us at code@acfid.asn.au. If you can see, once you've logged in, this is what you see. You see that first black box there, and it goes, I've screenshotted 3.1.1. So this is the response for 3.1.1. So you can see that the top column, or actually, I think I've got this, the top. Oh, no, sorry, I thought I had a laser on my mouse and it didn't work. The top text box was what you previously wrote in your last CSA. And you don't have to rewrite it all over again. You can just click this button that says copy response. It pre-fills your answers from, you know, last 3 years. So that is hopefully a little bit helpful in time saving for your teams and for your organization. But, you know, these answers were from 3 years ago. So while it is a really helpful base, I do recommend that you have a quick read over of those answers and update them, especially if you got comments from last time about things that weren't quite clear. It'd be great if you incorporated all those into the one answer in the narrative response area, because then we won't come back to you and ask you, hey, what are these things that we asked and talked about last time? So hopefully this won't happen to a lot of you, but it might. That's okay too. It's part of the process. It's a, you know, back and forth, and it's about learning. What happens if you get a CSA resubmission? So in the old system, you had to write in the old text box and then, like, you know, put a different color on it or date it just to tell us, you know, what you'd updated. You don't have to do that anymore. And actually, please don't do that because your answers don't save. So it's a waste of your time and our time. So the original submission is down the bottom, and then the ACFID feedback is up the top, kind of like a text message. You know, when you're on your phone and you're texting someone, you get one bubble, I get one bubble, you get one bubble, I get one bubble. It goes like that. It's exactly the same on this new portal. All you need to do to answer is to click on that add comment button. So if you add your answers and clarify to us what we're asking you in that box, it will save properly and we will get to see it. Again, if you type in the original submission box, it doesn't save and we have no idea what you wrote, which totally defeats the point of, you know, a resubmission. And, you know, if you didn't save the answers on your end on a totally different portal, you're going to have to rewrite them. So please, just to save yourself some time, please use the add comment button. I think a lot of you already are quite well versed in knowing how to use the new My ACFID, but if you don't, that's okay. Or if you're onboarding a new board member or a committee member or new staff, we have a set of really useful how-to guides. All you have to do is go to my ACFID, click the My Code of Conduct tab, and right underneath there, there's a tab or a title called Useful Resources. Scroll all the way down, and there's a set of like 10, 12 how-to guides, and they're specifically screen grabs that set things out one by one. So it's especially helpful for managing chairs and telling them how to, do an approval so that, it's like, oh, what do you do? Other tips and tricks is definitely please utilize the quality assurance framework. The good practice toolkit online has been updated, including, and I'll just link it to you now, including lots more member examples. So that is if, you're not quite sure of what, sorry, I can't paste and talk at the same time. There we go. Here's the good practice toolkit. So online, it shows you exactly what the compliance indicator and the commitment is. And then when you open the little boxes, it also shows you exactly all the different verifiers that we're looking for. And then once you scroll down even more on the good practice toolkit, there's a whole bunch of resources, including external links, as well as the downloads and member examples of what we consider to be, a really good example of meeting the code of conduct. So spend a bit of time there, and you can use it, from now until your reporting due date to update some of your policies or wording on your own websites or in your policies and all your other documents. Like Marvin says, please be detail orientated and descriptive. What we're looking for is to know what your processes are step by step. Pretend that me and Marvin are onboarding, with you at your organization. How do we know if we were working there, what kind of checklists we need to do before a program starts? Or how do we know we're procuring something ethical in the supply chain? Like what processes are there? What checklists are there? Who approves all these things? And how do you know? And of course, use examples. It's really great to learn about your organizations. I think that's one of the real perks is working with ACFID and working with all of you members is that we get to learn about so many different people, organizations, and all of the really positive, good things that you all do. So be proud, use examples, tell us, be like, yes, we do this and we meet the code because we are doing good practice, be really, into compliance. It's not just like, oh, well, we have to do this, but it's, like we're here to do a good job and we want to share that. Now I'm going to just show you some examples of good answers and not so great answers. So for example, here is for 6.1, commitment 6.1. This is not a very good answer. You can see that it's quite vague. It tells you that, it kind of, rather than, telling you, it doesn't show you what it's actually doing. So this is an example of a non-compliant answer. This is an example of a compliant answer. You don't have to read the whole thing. Just quickly looking at the highlighted bits, it tells you that it has an approval matrix. It tells me that, publications and materials go through several levels of approvals so that, someone will catch something, hopefully. That, materials are collected by local staff members, that there's an indication about, consent. And in fact, not just consent, but informed consent, and we talk about how training is happening with your staff. And then there's a template for collecting stories so that it's ethical. And then there's even things about using translations or updating policies on a regular basis. So all of those details gives us a really good picture about how the code of practice, code of conduct is put into practice in your organization. It doesn't mean that all of the organizations here have to do it exactly the same. It just means tell us how you see the code and how do you put that into action in your organization. Anyway, I hope that helps and I hope those were some really good tips and tricks. If not, let me know and what kind of other tips and tricks you'd prefer to know. I will go to questions now. Of course, if there's any questions of anything that I've just, said now, absolutely pop it in the chat, or we can, you just unmute yourself and, yell out. Otherwise, let's open the floor to questions. We did have a couple of pre-submitted questions, and I'll throw back to Doug to answer some of those while everybody's percolating with their questions. Thanks a lot, everybody. Back to you,
Thanks,
Doug.
Wade. Yeah. So we have received like a couple of questions. I think both questions are very good timing because we've been talking about pretty much the changes to the code and the expectations around compliance in our collaboration with our learning team here at ACFID. So the first one is there a recommended framework, methodology, examples for calculating carbon footprint? So as I explained earlier, this is one of the compliance indicator in area of climate change because we would like you to have a policy statement or framework to look at your internal operations. The good news is like we do have an example from one of our members, Family PNG Australia. So we are very happy to share their carbon calculator with you in an email after this webinar. At the same time, if you are interested, I would ask you to consider joining the climate change community of practice. There will be more examples, conversations with other members. I believe it's going to be very helpful experience for you. And the second question is also like examples of naming and addressing power imbalances. Again, I think this is relevant to the compliance indicators we put in the revised code around locally led action. For this one, as I said, it's good timing too, because we just had our locally led action community of practice special seminar this morning. From the conversation, I understand our members, they are doing different things. They try to be culture sensitive and they try to be informed by the operating context of the work they do when they look at the power imbalances. To be honest, we don't really have good examples to share at the moment. And as I mentioned a few times, this batch will be the first batch to be asked to report under the revised code. So hopefully we are going to collect some good examples from you so we can share with you. But for this particular question, I would recommend again, think about joining the locally led action community of practice. It is currently facilitated by two wonderful conveners, Lauren from Family PNG Australia and Kathy from the Fred Hollows Foundation. And another opportunity for us to share ideas will be in November when ACFID Learning Team invites you to join I'm not sure to what extent some of you have been to the climate change Right Shop. We're going to do the same Right Shop for local led development in November. So watch this space. Which I'll hand it back to you.
Thanks, Doug. I also popped up in the chat some resources. So at the Code Roadshow, we did feature the ActionAid's Code of Conduct, which calls out explicitly has a section on calling out power and privilege, which can serve as I guess, a starting point. In the Good Practice Toolkit, there are also some good reading materials and I guess food for thought kind of resources there, because there's things like community-based inclusive development, top-down, bottom-up mobilization. There's some case studies. There's also, like Doug said, the locally led development toolkit that we launched at the roadshow that is accessible to all ACFID members in Learn with ACFID. But yes, it's a work in progress. This area is still a work in progress. So, there are resources, but we're still looking for more. And, as we continue to assess members, we'll have even more examples to be able to share. So yeah, I hope that addresses those two questions. Does anybody else have any other questions? Pop it in the chat, unmute yourself. Yeah, we're here to help make sure that reporting against the new code isn't too much of a compliance burden.
If I can add one point, which I feel like at ACFID, we do value very much the diversity of our members. And we are on this journey together. So it's great if we can always share ideas. We are planning to have more drop-in sessions in the future to make 3 of us more available to you. And at the same time, please always, you're always welcome to send email to the code inbox, and we're very happy to provide any help. And I also saw, like, in the chat box, wait, can we get a copy of these slides? Yes, you will. And you will also receive the recording of this session.
Great. Yeah, so if you didn't catch who we were in the first place, here are our details. Our email is, or the code team's email is code@acfid.asn.au. It's best to email that email if you have any questions about the code, just because we don't always, most of the team doesn't really work full time. So if you email us individually on our personal emails, we might not get to it until the next time we're in. But if you email the code inbox, that's always monitored by at least somebody who's at work. So hopefully that helps. Otherwise, yeah, we'll just stay on, and if you have any questions or want to chat about or clarify anything, we'll stay on. Otherwise, you got 4 minutes back.
We do have a QR code, right?
Did you change it? Did you?
Oh, okay.
Because otherwise it's
no
not
worries.
the right one.
No worries. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.